Good morning and welcome to the Brattleboro Citizens Breakfast Selectboard Forum. Selectboard candidates for the election, which will be held on March the 6th, Tuesday, and early ballot is opening now, so you can get an early ballot. Brandi Starr is uncontested for a 3-year term. And there are 2 one-year terms being contested by William Forchion, Shanta Lee Gander, and Tim Wessel. And at this breakfast, all of the candidates are present. I sent out an email before this happened and solicited questions, and received about 7 questions. We've shared them with the candidates, so they're ultimately prepared to give answers. If we get through all the questions, possibly, we can open this up. I want to thank everyone for being here, and I want to thank all the candidates for taking their time and devoting themselves to this public service. So without further ado, the first question that's been submitted is somewhat general. How will your background be helpful as a select board member? And we're asking each candidate to give an answer to the question and maybe try to limit to about a minute. We haven't decided who's going to go first. I'm leaving that up to you. Been voted in.
Well, good morning. Good morning, Starshines. So, how will my background help on the select board? I have 2 answers to that question. One is from kind of a personal life experience side. I grew up in poverty. I grew up in broken home, very abusive homes. I've seen kind of generational life cycles that have been unhealthy and uncomfortable and very sad. And I've also lived for the past 15 years in very safe, kind of white collar, jobs and a safe home, and have had opportunities to meet people who have really never seen the things that I've seen firsthand. And so I believe that what I bring to the table from that perspective is an ability to kind of sit between people from different walks of life and act as a mediator or a translator so that people can hear from me in a way that I believe they'll hear best, kind of tailoring my words to the audience, how I interpret what I'm hearing from the other person who might otherwise feel unattainable to the listener. From more of a professional, doing the actual nuts and bolts work position, I would say that I bring 10 years of working with budgets. I'm very comfortable with forward-thinking projections. I'm very comfortable with budget assumptions. I have no problem kind of balancing out things that are really kind of technical and monotonous with things that are more of a strategic vision, more visionary, a little bit more complex, and bringing those ideas all the way down to paper and all the way down to numbers so that we have something tangible in the end.
Next. Hi, everybody. Thank you again for inviting us to share a little bit about ourselves. My name is Shanta Lee Gander. I'm originally from Connecticut, and I've done all sorts of work in different cities and in different states. My background is in coalition building, and it also includes getting everyone in the room, from churches to local government to nonprofits and for-profits, to often discuss what was in my past work, a lot of difficult and challenging topics. I've lived in Brattleboro for the past 9 years. I'm deeply passionate about Brattleboro, and one of the things that's renewed my passion about sense of place and being here was being tapped to enact the role of Lucy Terry Prince for the people's, places, and history of words, which has allowed me to really get more of a depth and context and scope of here and be thinking about our history as well as ways to move forward. So I, not only as just being an artist here, but also I have my educational background, my graduate training and MBA, so very comfortable with numbers. I have over a decade of experience of having not only worked with numbers, but also worked with ways of trying to do creative problem solving. I've learned from all of my sum of experiences that you can't move forward and without the difficult conversations that are sometimes uncomfortable, and without going right into uncomfortable situations, but also doing a lot of listening and asking questions. So what I've learned is not to be afraid to ask questions or admit what I don't know, or call up the individuals and go directly to the people who would be able to provide me with some information and some balance to figure out, the best ways to make a decision. And so that's what I offer, and that's what I bring, in addition to just being intensely passionate and energetic and very much willing to have some of the difficult conversations, because this work is challenging, and we can't get it all done at the same time, but I with some of my experiences, I've learned to understand that. So thank you.
Hi, it's Tim. My name's Tim. I've been on the select board 1 year. It's been quite the experience. To answer the question, I think my background from my family was I had a very conservative father, and I drifted further to the left than my father through the years, and was able to engage with him on a lot of issues in a very good level. We would come together and find those common grounds. And Brandi kind of stole my answer, because I was going to say that I think on the board I've been pretty good at being between literally John Allen and Brandi and David, and John will say something and I'll sort of agree but not agree, and I lean forward and I look at Brandi and I think, now how can I say something that will sort of reflect what John's saying but also reflect that look that Brandi's giving me right now? Because there are looks, believe me. I think what I retained from sort of a conservative father's background is a fiscal conservatism, which I think is really important for the citizens of this town. You can't really go off spending money on things that everyone can't embrace. So that's the democracy aspect of what we do on the select board. And Brandi and David will confirm that we have very little money to work with, because it's all of our money and we have only a little bit of wiggle room. But we also have a lot of guidance that we can provide by providing conversations. We did that with the panhandling conversation for one, and a lot of conversations we've been having around diversity and very important issues that we ourselves on the select board can't exactly solve. But we can start the conversation and be that point where people can come in and talk about these things, and that's very important. I think I'm kind of drifting, and I'm going to go over and give it over to Bill here.
Good morning. Thank you all for inviting me here today. How will my background help in being on the select board? My background is in working with teams and using the resources that are around me. The answer to the question also goes to how do I lead? And I lead in a very horizontal way. And I look at the resources that I have, the people that are around me, and I find who can best be the solution. I don't always have to be the solution. My background in travel is that whenever I enter a new environment, I sit and I find out what that environment is. I listen, I look, I watch how things operate, and I don't try to assert myself into it and make the big changes. I look for where the gaps are that are necessary to be filled and figure out if I can fill that gap or if I can find a resource that can fill that gap. I think that's the simplest answer.
Please give us an example of a time when you changed your mind on an important topic after hearing the perspectives of others. And this question comes with someone who had some experience on the board, I understand. Okay.
Running for select board is I have talked for years about politics, government, governance. Over the last year, I've spoken with many people. A really good kick in the pants was from John Allen when we were talking about diversity last summer on the softball field. There is never a great time to get involved, right? Because there's always something else that can be done. We all have the same 24 hours in a day. And my 24 hours are spilling over to 28, 29. The big change for me is that now is the time that I can get involved. Not because it fits, not because it works in the schedule, because now's the time. And having the conversations that I've had with people throughout town in different communities, at the fitness center or the softball field, that's a big change for me. Instead of just having that conversation in my kitchen, to be able to put my hat in the ring and step out and give this a try.
So when I read the question, I just kind of myopically related it right back to work that we've done on the select board. And so the answer that I chose was with the infamous panhandling sign. I was on the committee with David, who thought that, who thought about what we could do. I was in favor of the idea of a sign because I wanted it to speak to a side of the population that felt like we weren't hearing their concerns and we weren't caring. And so I was moving along with it. I thought I was going to vote yes. I thought that the language on it was okay. And then I started to hear from people. And I realized that after the first meeting where everything was reviewed, I went home and was very uneasy. And I had a gnawing in my stomach about it. And I went online and insanely read every comment on every thread that I could find from every person and just kind of slept with that for the night. And I realized that it didn't align with my core values, that yes, I was trying to reach out to a segment of our population that felt that their concerns weren't being heard. But that didn't mean that it related to who I was as a person, and it's really important to me that I always vote as my conscience and as myself. And so I did vote down the sign, even though I had initially been one of the creators and was in favor of it. So there's a really clear example of recently in my life, 100 times. I love to listen to other people's viewpoints, and I always feel almost kind of giddy when they can change my mind, because it feels good, because when you can interact with another human and they can tell you their side of the story and you cannot react to that, just be open to it and listen to it and hear it and then kind of join back with them in conversation and a whole new perspective comes out of that, that's got to be one of the most beautiful things that you can do with a group of people.
And I'm changing my answer on the fly. Because I like that you brought up a select board example, so I'll do the same. I think a good example is the plastic bag ban. So basically the entire select board was in favor of doing the ban, which was refreshing, and then we didn't realize that we'd get into a huge conversation about the thickness of the bags. And who knows? And somebody is sitting right there, Tim, who was very helpful in changing my decision on this thickness. So basically my idea of the target was these bags at Hannaford's or Price Chopper, and I don't think they're in the co-op. These really thin, flimsy ones that already have a hole. They're like the hole is made for you, right? So they're not useful beyond single or couple use. So I thought that's what we should target. And 1 mil thickness would do that, because these bags tend to be like 0.75 or 0.95, I don't remember. And that was what I was pushing for, but we didn't make a decision that meeting. Then Tim reached out to me and said, hey, I'd like to share with you some data that would encourage you maybe to think about increasing the mill thickness. I looked at the data because I'm very science-driven, data-driven with my decisions. And I changed my mind, and we ultimately landed higher. I don't think as high as you wanted, or some of the advocates wanted, but at 2.25, I think. I think it was 2.25. So that's a good example of changing your mind on a very important issue, because it now makes it more effective, in my opinion. So definitely saw the wisdom of that thickness.
So the question kind of stumped me at first. I'm thinking about all the ways in which I started down one path and got feedback and had to, make another turn in another direction. And I thought about Artstravaganza when I was the former president of the Arts Council of Windham County. I thought about getting feedback and people saying, let's do something, let's re-engage, let's remind people that the Arts Council is here. And the process of, I had this really big vision in terms of everyone it would impact, everyone I'd like to outreach to, everyone I'd like to include as partners. And then as we went along, taking inventory and looking at the reality of how much money we had to actually do this said idea, how much energy that people had to put into it in addition to myself, and getting to a point just based off of all of the feedback that came from the committee I had started and I was working within, thinking about some of the individuals and some of the organizations and businesses that I began to partner with, and then looking at, okay, well, we have to think about this more realistically. Here's how I have to change it. And what I learned from that experience, as well as many others I could think of, is the needing sometimes to be open to even changing what your vision is or what your hopes may be for something, and matching that with onward more momentum, or even being brave enough to sometimes say, nope, we can't do that, and we're going to have to do something else. But that was a decision that I made that was based off of all the feedback from everybody and managing it, but yet still doing an event for the first year that we implemented it that involved everyone, but now with a newer vision and something that was based off of all the feedback, and that really helped to ground me. So ultimately I learned that you have to be open to the change and manage your own expectations in the mix as well.
So this may be unfair because I did share the questions in advance and everyone wrote at least 4-page answers to each question. But I'm thinking the next one may be just a lightning round and give us no more than 3 top priorities. What are the major issues facing the town? No more than 4. Okay, 3 or 4 major issues facing the town. Who would like to go? Who has more issues? No.
Handle my issues. So I like to think of it in terms of everything that we're going to be navigating, because sometimes it often feels like you are putting the car together while you're driving it. And so that's what I often think about. I think that the town is, and based off of a lot of the conversations I've had, we're continually thinking about infrastructure, thinking about the ways to strengthen the quality of life for all here, in terms of our tools, in terms of our equipment that we need for the efficiency of a town. We need to be also thinking about energy conservation, the safety of our pedestrians and our cyclists, given the increase of vehicles that are on the road. We also have very real hard-hitting issues that are impacting our families and our individuals, opioid crisis, for example, is no secret. Mental health issues here to navigate around. Also, thinking about homelessness and how do we bring all the individuals who are impacted by these things to the table, or expand our table to include them in the conversation, especially as it relates directly to the powers that the select board actually has. I think ultimately Brattleboro has to be conservative with its values, not lose track of what makes us unique, and yet very dynamic in pursuing economic opportunities based on our strengths. I think that's a very key thing. We have to take inventory of what our strengths are and how do we leverage that in order to work on and resolve a lot of these challenges and priorities that we have right in front of us. And echoing something that Tim said earlier, within limited constraints of money, which is a very real thing. So I think those are some of the main things that we're working at. They're very big things. We also started a conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and looking at all of this through the lens of how do we do it with compassion. And so I think it's a matter of, again, how are we building and driving the car at the same time and navigating these things in a way that's very inclusive and in a way that ultimately leads to a greater quality of life for all involved.
I think on the past year's select board, it was not only are we building the car while we're driving it, but we don't know who's driving the car at all times. We take turns at the wheel, put it that way. Let's see, I've answered the question. So my top answer to what are the major issues facing the town is the very most important thing, in my opinion, is delivering the services that our citizens want at the lowest possible cost. That is exactly what the select board does. Sorry, thank you. We need to provide the services that we all expect and want our town to provide, and we need to do it efficiently. And I think that is the most important pressing issue on the select board. We need to keep people safe and improve the quality of life is another answer for this. My big push after my first year, I feel like my first year has really been a lot of learning, a lot of absorbing information, a lot of wonderful realizations of how well our town does work and how well Peter Elwell does at managing our town. But Peter and I have been in a lot of conversations about the idea of Brattleboro is an economic hub. And you've heard this at the past election cycle too. We need to really pursue this with the state. And so that's going to be one of my top priorities. Brattleboro has a lot of services it provides and doesn't necessarily have the revenue to be able to provide those services because we're almost entirely dependent upon real estate taxes. That goes back to, the structure of Vermont is that we are a Dillon rule state, which I won't go into that because we've talked about it a lot, but that basically means that we can't start a revenue source without the approval of the legislature. Yesterday I spent all day in Montpelier at town meeting day. Through the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, they sponsor us to come up and advocate for several different policies that will help the town not bear the entire burden of all the policies that are coming down from the state. So we talked about roads, we talked about how to pay for water quality, which we all want. We talked about climate protection and not laying that all on the backs of the taxpayers in the towns. So there, I've gone on long enough. Thank you.
What are the major issues facing the town? I think looking at each of the individual things overlooks the big picture. We deal with taxes, we deal with funding, we deal with a lot of things, infrastructure. Really what the big picture is our community healthy? We're dealing with a crisis, an opioid crisis, we have homelessness, we just built the fire station and the police station. All these things will keep being there if we're not addressing what is the problem, the big problem. What is that problem that's keeping our community either from being healthy or keeping it healthy?
So I wrote this out in bullet point kind of form because I was thinking of it as, you know, what are the foundational things that we all need as citizens, less on the emotional side, but more on just the structural side, to be able to be thriving. Some of the things I thought of in that were, we have insufficient streets for the fact that we are a hub town. You know, there are, what, 12,500 people that live here. There's about 45,000 that live in Windham County, and you see that swell through the middle of downtown traffic. You see, and we're just not built for it, right? Because we used to be a town where people came down on their horses, horse paths. You've driven on, you know, Strand Ave or whatever, and you're like, what's happening here? People are gonna die on this road. But you can't just, like, we weren't built as a grid, and we're never gonna be a grid. And that's really hard, especially for people that are influxing into Brattleboro, to kind of visualize, like, why aren't the streets like they were where I came from? Because we weren't built around a center. We were built, people wanted to live somewhere, and they built a house, and then they had to sell stuff or buy stuff, so they came down. And it kind of worked in reverse of what people are used to from other places. We have a lack of diversity of industry for job growth. So we know we have thriving arts, we know we have, you know, good restaurants and culture, but we used to have mills where people could work and we felt proud of what we exported. That built a sense of pride, it built it built jobs. And so I look at that and I say, we need to kind of reinvent ourselves. Like, why aren't we the green energy hub? Why aren't we, you know, why aren't we growing hemp so that we can turn it into these bags we're trying to replace and paper towels? Like, where's our tech industry? I think this microphone doesn't like me. I'll just yell if it stops working. And on top of those things, and in some ways, because of those things, we have a flat grand list, right? So as Tim discussed, that's where we get our money. That's how we make this place thrive for people that do live here and marketable for people that we need to come here. We need people to come here and buy a home. We need people to come here and take jobs. We need people to come here and take care of the people who are aging, because in this area, that is what is going on right now. So we have to be attractive to people. We have to invest money to be attractive. They have to see that we're taking care of our infrastructure, that we're willing to do the hard work. And so how do we grow the grand list so that we can then make sure that our streets are good, so that we can then upgrade our aging infrastructure, so that we can, you know, that's what I see as the problem, is we're just not quite there yet. We just aren't that marketable yet, and we just aren't making enough money to fully take care of everybody who already lives here that needs to be taken care of. Is that okay that the microphone broke?
I don't know, it keeps going in and out. Try to hold it like that. So I'm going to take this out of order because we've actually spent a lot of time and the clock is moving along. I'm going to sort of jump down to the last question that we had. And let's frame it this way. So there have been things that have been happening on the federal level, you may have heard. I don't know. But term the federal government's inability, or maybe unwillingness, to tackle the issues that we seem to feel are important. Science-driven energy policy. We can fold in climate change, energy, dependence on fossil fuels. Infrastructure. The new infrastructure bill at the federal level, if you don't know, is basically let the states pay for it. Economic health impacts of our environment. The opioid crisis is a major problem. We're not going to fund anything about it, though. Healthcare. Well, let the market figure that one out. Structural racism, diversity. Well, let's eliminate the the division within the Department of Justice that deals with that. So that's the federal's response. Limited ability of the state government to deal with those issues. Well, where are those issues really impacting? At the town level, at the municipal level, how is it that we can deal with those? And Brandi touched on it, we're talking about increasing the grand list, but how do we do that? Is that that's really too hard of a question. It's a huge question. It's a huge question. More coffee. Anyone jumping?
I'm running.
So, is this microphone working? Can everybody hear me? Okay. Yes and no. All right, so I'll project my voice without busting anyone's eardrums. I think that some of these really big issues we've attempted to try to tackle in different ways and in different versions in this town. I also want to be very honest and say, as we all know, there's limited time. And so we need to be thinking about the small incremental steps as well as these really big things that we want to try to tackle immediately. You know, certainly and all the stuff that I've been reading and watching and paying attention to in terms of this town, we've thought about things in terms of our economic and health impacts, you know, in our environment. The town has taken some very good, strong steps in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion. There was a decision made to hire human resources professional. Again, those are starts, but we still need to be thinking about meaningful ways. If we're talking about inclusion and we know about the reality of our aging population, how do we think about meaningful ways to engage our youth and give them leadership opportunities and invite them to the table? How are we doing that planning so that all of our future plans continue to go forward and that we're able to train the next generation or invite them to hear their voice around some of these things? Also, how are we making authentic connections across class divides? That's a really big thing here that I've noticed in this area. Brattleboro wants to see these things through a lens of compassion. We made an effort. We signed a resolution last year around Brattleboro being a compassionate town, but what does that mean? So I summarized just a few key points. We need to be able to address all of these big things through a lens of how does this improve the quality of life for everyone? How do we invite people to be a part of the table? I've sat around a lot of tables for years. I've been a part of a lot of different things at different levels here. And sometimes you run into the same people, and not that it's a bad thing, but how do we diversify who's at that table or bring the table to them? And some of my talks with SEVCA, Groundworks, Youth Services, and many other individuals and groups, there's a question that kept coming up in terms of we need to be asking ourselves, how do our decisions affect everyone? How do our decisions, how do our good intentioned decisions and policies affect or possibly harm our most vulnerable in this community? How are we including our most vulnerable in this community and seeing them as a part of the bigger picture? How are we threading all of these big issues through with our values around diversity, equity, and inclusion? And to just wrap it up, if we think about the concept of a compassionate town, how do we approach our values and access across class services? I didn't come from a silver spoon background. And so I think about those things and where are the individuals, for example, who live in the trailer parks? And how, is anyone talking to them? And how will all these things impact? Again, good intentions, but who loses, who wins, and how do we mitigate and balance out potential harms?
Okay, really quickly, can you hear me? We have limited ability, but we have a lot of ability. We have to, economically, all we can do is chip away at the edges of these problems. But we can do so with a local focus. That's our advantage on the flip side. We can do things like devote town extra money resources to Groundworks, which we approved just recently. A little extra boost because they had this need and they needed an extra, I believe it was $10,000, and that's something the community did for a very valuable organization. I'd like to see more. I mean, there's all kinds of great things happening in our community, and the select board not necessarily has to be a funder, but a place where they can come and start to be organized using the platform we have, because people watch these meetings and we can be a launching point. Something that jumps to mind is Aaron Skagg's childcare thing that was just started. It's called Playdate. Do you guys know about this? I have to confess, I'll do a personal thing. I just became a father again at the age of 50, so I have a 4-week-old son, and that's quite a trip in itself. I could go on and on. But the important thing is we need good quality childcare around here so that people can work, so that people can get a break, and we don't really have the ability to pay for it, but holy cow, she put together this program, and maybe we can get some money from somewhere. Maybe we can find town money, but let's partner with people that have these really great ideas. That's about it, except I was going to throw out something that popped into my head, is that this democracy and these limitations is super messy, and I wouldn't want it any other way, because we have a town where people are really getting excited and having a lot of great input, and it's great. I just love to see everybody here and everybody be involved, and I'm very positive about the future of Brattleboro.
I think we've touched on a deep topic here because it got real heavy. Wow. How do we deal with these issues? I don't have the solution, but I know that the solution is here. The solution is us. Shanta touched on reaching out to our younger members of the community. There's a voice there that we're not listening to. Reaching to some of the older members of our community who've seen what has happened. There's a voice there that needs to be listened to. How do we deal with the diversity and the equality and all those issues that are popping up? We listen. There's a lot of listening that needs to happen. I can relate to, 10 years ago I built a house. I'm a performer by trade. I've never built a house before. And I had to do a lot of things that I'd never done before. It took me, I went to the home centers and I got accounts. And I was surprised that people were willing to share information. People were willing to help me learn how to plumb my house. I also hired a plumber to do that stuff, but that plumber also hired me as their assistant and taught me how to do their job, which I was shocked at. How can we do it different and still maintain ourselves, maintain our town? Do we need to follow the lead of our government in some place that's going errant? In some ways that we can bring it back. There are things that I did when I built my house that people thought, oh my goodness, why are you doing that? Which I didn't put any heating on the second floor because I knew that the wood stove in an energy efficient house would heat the house. People looked at me and went, wait a minute, you can't do that. For hundreds of years, we've done it this way. It works, 10 years on. There was energy efficiency things that we had to put into the house, compact fluorescents, which Efficiency Vermont gave me a rebate for. 10 years on, those compact fluorescents are almost obsolete. We now have another new efficient way. Would I have done it any different? No, because that was the way it was done then, and it was efficient. There is a new, more efficient way, and that will constantly happen. We can't not do it because it will change in the future. If we need to have a healthy town, and we need to do certain things, and they're efficient, and they're healthy for our community, let's do that. Thank you.
Okay. I wrote nothing down for this question because I was like, woo! But I really like what everybody has said so far. We are limited in many ways, but we also are doing things in many ways. We've got Chief Fitzgerald's task force made up of individuals going out and reaching out to our homeless and to our addicted population weekly, knowing that the first 20 times they might say, go away for now. And that maybe on the 21st time they might say, fine, whatever, I'm ready to listen, or I'm ready for help. We have a very strong energy committee and an energy coordinator looking into things like energy resilience, advising us on things that we need to do to make energy upgrades. We have an energy audit, and it's rolled, the work from that audit is rolled into town plans. Is there more we could do? Yeah, I'd like to see us, running off our own batteries. I'd like to see us being a little more self-sufficient with our energy. One of the big things that we can do is just hold space for moral impact, hold space for people to start to understand people from other walks of life. That is the most important thing that we can do, is learn how to treat each other with respect, because then the ways that we need to help each other will come from a natural place. It won't come from a place of, I'm writing this policy because I think this is what's best for everybody. It will come from a place of understanding. The opiate crisis that we face in this town is a huge problem that is not going to be fixed anytime soon, I promise you. And the best thing we can do is to treat people like humans while also trying to work on what needs to be done. An example of how broken it is if one of those people who are addicted says yes to the task force, or comes to you on the street and says, can you help me? I want to get out of this. I just want to get out of this. And you take them to the retreat, and you're so excited, right? That's what you want to do. And then they apply them immediately for Medicaid, and this person's like, all right, the process is rocking here. We're moving forward. The next thing that happens is they need identification, which means they need birth certificate, which means they need their social security card. And at some point, that's where it breaks. And that person who finally came to you for help or said yes to Gunny is now right back where they were. And on top of the addiction they suffered with, they now have the understanding that the last time they asked for help, somebody tried to help them and it didn't work. Things aren't as easy, things are uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to see people in town who are homeless. It's uncomfortable to be asked for money, especially when many of us who are in tune with other humans can tell who needs that money because they're starving and who needs that money because they're hurting from their addiction. But we're not going to fix it with our brains, and we're not going to fix it quickly so that everybody feels better about it. These things take time, and in the meantime, we need to have compassion. Energy improvements take time and money, and in the meantime, we have to have patience and have faith in the people who are doing the energy audits, faith in the town department heads to be implementing them, faith in the energy committee that they are holding that vision, faith in Phoebe Gooding, our energy coordinator. We need to just be a little more grounded and more open and work with each other through these hard things.
Thank you. We're ending on a very sobering note. We've got, no, and it's a good sobering note. You can't. Do you want to end with a joke? But it's a good sobering note that these are problems. We need to deal with it. We have some leaders who are up for election to help us with that. Election is Tuesday, March the 6th. Early balloting has already started. If you've made a decision, you can vote now. Go to the town clerk's office or call them up for a ballot. There are vacancies we have representative town meeting, which is held on March 24th, a Saturday. And there are vacancies in all the districts. Too many vacancies. The vacancies can be filled at caucus, which you know. The caucus will occur on March the 14th. That's a Wednesday. It's at Academy School. The doors open at 6 o'clock. 6:30 is the caucus. That's how the representative town meeting members are filled at caucus. And the informational meeting follows that day. Any final comments?
You can also be a write-in candidate on March 6th for a town meeting rep, just so you know.
Oh, you want to close? I'm seeing it. I want to get locked out. I would like to finish up what I have to say by saying it's an honor to be in this group of people up for election. I don't think you can make a bad choice. It's great to know that I have this company. Also in making your choice and how our town government is. It's a body, head, heart, and gut. And we need all of that. We need the thinkers. We need the passionate people. And we need the food that's gonna feed our town, right? So when you look at that makeup of what our select board is, does it cover the head, the heart, and the gut? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Would you like a stone? Yeah. Ready for the stone? Yeah.